If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything that you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on any listening platform like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many, many more. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. From Battlefield Studio Alpha, welcome to the Wartime Leadership Podcast, where we explore what spiritual resilience looks like from different perspectives. We often focus on the physical, emotional, and social areas of resiliency, but too often we neglect the spiritual pillar. Now, this looks different for everyone. We will be exploring what spiritual resilience looks like in the lives of our guests, who are people from all different walks of life. I'm your host, Nathan Coy, and this season has been sponsored by Success Draft, where we help you transform your dreams into drafted plans. Head over to successdraft.com to get started on your future today. Hey, folks, we have hit a milestone. This is the first episode of 2023. Ooh, that's crazy. 2023. Now, we're recording this slightly before. In fact, my friend today is Caryn. She's actually one of my wife's best friends, and her husband, Dan, is one of my best friends. But they have decided to up and leave us from South Carolina and return back to Ohio. Now, here's the funny thing. They're Ohio State fans, and today happens to be the day that Ohio State got beat by Michigan. Makes it even better.
Oh, it's terrible.
See, you moved back, you moved away from here, and all of a sudden they lost again.
Yeah, it's not my doing. I didn't watch. Well, I watched a little bit of the game, but it's not my fault.
You probably heard Dan most of the time. Just
I was shopping today. Today was a nice, quiet shopping day where everyone in this area was glued to a TV. So I was out there shopping with a couple other wives and my son. So it was a good day.
Well, it's great to see you, and I know that it's a nice warm day in Ohio, which is very, very rare for the winter. So you said tomorrow it'll probably be -2?
Yes. They say if you don't like the weather in Ohio, wait about 15 minutes and it'll certainly change. So it was a nice
It's funny that you say that because of the fact that Will Rogers was the one who said that. And he was speaking about Oklahoma weather, but it almost seemed like everywhere that he went, he would say it. If you don't like the weather in Ohio, just stay 15. It'll change. Yeah. Don't like the weather in Washington, just stay 15 minutes. It'll change.
Yeah, it's definitely not original. Not at all.
Well, hey, Caryn, you know how this works because you have been a faithful listener since episode 1, and I'm so grateful to have you. And now I get to be a part of helping you tell part of your story, part of your testimony. And I'm really looking forward to it, but you know how it is. Before we get into that, we have to ask the random questions.
Okay.
And now these are actually completely random now because I have a random question generator.
Okay.
So question 1, if you were stranded on an island, what is one item that you would take with you?
I would take, although I wouldn't have cell service, I guess I couldn't take my cell phone because how could I charge it? I would take something so that I could listen to music. You know, it would be something. So if it's a Walkman, but I don't know how it would, I'd have to have a lifetime supply of batteries. I don't know. But something.
Yeah, we're not airdropping them. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can't really go long periods of time, especially solitary time, without music, without being able to sing or being able to, just have that any kind of music. I'm down.
Well, now I was about to say, like, you have an absolutely beautiful voice, and you play
Oh,
the
thank you.
keyboard. So, I mean,
I
you could
do.
almost just imagine it.
I could, yeah, I could just make my own music, I suppose. So, all right. So, thanks for poo-pooing on that. I guess I would say a hair dryer, a hair dryer, and a forever outlet. That would be
And I was about to
stranded on an
say, and you're going
outlet.
to plug it into the coconut tree that's giving you shade. Congratulations.
Absolutely. I'm going to be the first one to conduct energy from a coconut. Is that the right word?
Forget about you, Gilligan, and Dr. whatever your name was. Haha. 3-hour
Professor.
tour. What is your favorite movie?
Oh gosh. My favorite comedy, it's so inappropriate. It's old school. and,
Oh.
and I know it's very inappropriate, but it makes me laugh so much. Will Ferrell, I mean, it's some of the most ridiculous things. And I didn't have college years. I didn't live on campus and that kind of stuff. It was definitely always what I had dreamed of, is having that type of experience in college, and just the fact that they were in their 40s and doing it, it cracked me up. I have a lot of other girly movies that I love too, but I would say I love comedies, so that would be my favorite.
I could even see Dan, being in one of those types of situations.
Um, he's very low key, Dan. He's very conscientious and low key, and he just would prefer to just keep it chill. I mean, he's a
Yeah,
chill
but I
man.
could see him I've seen him get riled up.
Yeah.
I've seen
Oh,
it.
yeah. Yeah. Put some sports in there, and maybe
The
a
Browns or the
hard
Indians or
seltzer.
whatever they're called now. What are they now? The
Well,
Guardians?
the Indians are now the Guardians, so they're no longer the Cleveland Guardians, and they're still the Cleveland Browns. Thank you for asking.
As bad as they are in any other season, they are absolutely the Cleveland Browns.
They're still the Browns.
Oh boy. All right. Well, let's see what else we can ask you here. Hey, I'm giving you 2 plane tickets. One is to somewhere that you've already been, and one is to somewhere that you've never been. Where are those 2 tickets to?
Um, I would want to go back to Cozumel for
Hmm.
sure. Just because the last time we were there, it was just so calming and relaxing. And it was gorgeous. It was a beautiful day. It was a beautiful time with my husband. So, I mean, just that whole experience was great. So I would want to go back and just relive that again. Somewhere I've never been, I've always wanted to go to Greece. I don't have any
Hmm.
ties to Greece. I've just always heard growing up that it was 70 degrees every single day of the year and sunny, which I know is not necessarily true, but I just love that type of weather. Kind of South Carolina weather, 9 months out of the year, it's a nice 70 degrees. So Greece would just be beautiful. I love that ancient history type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Have you been to Greece?
I have not been. My
No.
parents went. They were blessed to be able to go, but not us.
Mhm.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet, because
The
I'm saying
world is
yet
your
because it's going to
oyster.
happen. It's going to
Yes.
happen.
Yeah.
All right. What's the worst job you've ever had?
Gosh, I've been so lucky to have some really good long-term jobs. So it's gonna have to be early on when I was a kid. When I first got a job, was I might have been 16, and it was the Whipple Dairy in Canton. And it was basically just a dairyette, a little thing where, saw little softball teams would come up and you'd have to twist the cones. And there was a manager who was, I don't want to say her name was Whipple, but it wasn't. But she was part of the family who owned a whole bunch of the Whipple Barber Shop, the Whipple Dairy, the Whipple everything. She was part of the family. It was like a family business. So she was always there, and it was all us teenagers, a bunch of 16-year-old giggly girls. And she was so strict and so mad at me all the time because I just couldn't get the swirl just right. And I couldn't get the whole concept of swirling and pulling down. And it was stress every day going to this cute little dairyette. I didn't last long, for sure. I don't even know if it lasted a summer. But I don't do well under stress and pressure. I'm a perfectionist, So everything just, I want that swirl to be perfect. So, and then when someone questions that and says, "Is your heart not in it?" I'm like, "It really is. I swear it is."
I would have
I
been
want
like,
this.
no.
Oh, it was. I wanted it to be a perfect swirl. And yeah. Anyway, that I would say
This
that
is
would be my
absolutely
worst
amazing. You know,
job.
we actually talked about this, that there was going to be a lot of learning today on my part, because I've known you for 3 years. I know you,
Yeah.
and this whole day is going to be nothing but learning more about Caryn. And speaking of earlier and background, what is your background? Just kind of walk us through who Caryn is and where you've come from, stuff you've gone through. Just kind of bring us up to the current.
Oh, okay. Um, so like I said, get the laugh track ready. Just kidding. Don't do it. Um,
Oh,
so where I come from, so I was born and raised in Canton, Ohio, and if you know anything about the National Football League, you know Canton, Ohio as the home of the Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I always felt like Canton was like, nothing special ever happens here. But really, the older I got to see up close at the parade, of course. We would go to the big parade every year. Jim Kelly, right there. I mean, just rolling down Cleveland Avenue, or Anthony Munoz, like some of my favorite players. Like you could just see them. They were there. Tom Landry, like they were there. So it was really exciting if you love football, certainly. There's a lot of other attributes for Canton, but I just become a sports fan because of it. So just my mom and dad were both from the area. Their parents were from the area. My dad was Army. He was military police. I don't think I've ever told you that, but guess that would be, I don't know what era that would be, but he was 60s. So he graduated in 64. My dad, Jim and Joyce were their names. And my brother's name was Jerry, which is funny because I always felt a little bit odd because of the Jim, Joyce, Jerry, and Karen. I always wanted to be a Jennifer. I thought that'd be fun. Or Judy, anything. Judy, Judy, Judy. So
anything with a
anyway,
J.
yeah, I just wanted to be in part of the family. So they got married after he, finished his service. My dad was he was a really faceted dude. He was in high school he was a gymnast, which was I think would be rare for a boy, but he said he could walk on his hands all the way across the gym and back. And he was uh, uh he was a mechanic, he was a carpenter, he was a musician, a great musician. He was in a band. He was a singer. He was handsome. He was smart. He just had it going on. My mom, wasn't much to slouch about either. She was a pretty young girl. She kind of had a rough family life, but she um, left, home after they got married, and she brought along a couple of her youngest siblings to finish out their high school careers, so she sort of let them live with her while my dad was overseas. So when I was born, I think one of my aunts still lived with us. She was sort of raising those kids too. Um, after they had us, I guess their lifestyle was sort of 70s party mode. My dad's a musician, so a lot of time at, playing out at bars and clubs. And one of my favorite things is, I think the reason I love music so much is that there was always so much loud personality in music. Like the people that I was surrounded by, they were just larger than life to me. Like I remember my dad inviting some guys over and we had an old upright piano, and I didn't know, I was little. I don't remember what age, let's say 3 or 4, but I remember being right beside the piano and a man with long hair, I just remember thinking he looks like John Lennon, like it could have been, sat down and played Let It Be and sang it. And I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. And for him to be able to play and sing at the same time, it completely blew my mind away. And it's not like I was like, oh, then I wanted to learn how to play piano and sing. it was just an amazing thing to be around. My mom would wake me up because I would fall asleep. She would put us to bed. The school's on Monday, but the guys would still be playing down in the basement or wherever. And I couldn't hear them from my room, but I remember sneaking to the top of the stairs and laying down and listening to him play. And my mom would wake me up in the middle of the night and pick me up and take me back to my room because I just wanted to hear their voices, just to hear them talking. When if you're in the car, you're little and you lay your head on your mom's chest and you hear her talking, like that kind of sound, like that muffled. I loved it. So it was just, we were just surrounded by music and 8 tracks and vinyl. So, um, but that, of course, that kind of lifestyle for my parents. My mom spent more time with us as we were growing up. My dad was still in a band. um, they didn't always go out together. So, there was always that tension where my dad would go out and come home and, you were out late, that kind of stuff when we were small. Some arguments, some fights, just because, where you been and, well, it's not your business. You know where I was, that kind of stuff. It wasn't anything too terrible that I can remember being really young, but I do remember it just escalating. So my dad was a mechanical engineer for a big oil refinery right there in Canton. And he fell from a machine. I guess it was a couple stories high. And the way he explained it, he landed flat footed on the cement, is how he explained it. And it, of course, popped his hip out of socket, shattered his hip and part of his femur, and it was a mess. So he had to have hip replacement surgery really early. I guess he was born in 46, so this happened in the early 70s. So he was young. So he changed from being the full-time, breadwinner to my mom, where she works. She was a pharmacy transcriptionist. She worked more outside the house. She got a job at the Timken Company, which was a really big company there in Canton, like a steel plant. So she got a job there doing assembly work, and my dad then was disabled. He was at home all the time. So the roles changed, but the party drinking kind of turned into day drinking. And of course, day drinking turned into, you know, the band sort of fizzled out. We all have kids now, so I'll just drink at home alone. And you know, I I mean, if somebody says the word alcoholic, I don't imagine my dad as an alcoholic, but now what I know, he had a lot of those tendencies. He was going through severe depression, I'm sure quite a bit of anxiety, and like I said, he was super smart. So I think now, because I'm an adult, he just didn't have an outlet for those things anymore. And again, his friends had all moved on, maybe because he wasn't able to go out as much, or he was trying to be a family guy, trying to stay home. But it ended up being a lot of resentment, at home. And suddenly, uh, gosh, to I guess to describe it, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but some people say like walking on eggshells with someone who has acute anxiety is kind of that. It's that feel,
Yeah.
but eggshells wasn't even the word. I wouldn't say it wasn't. At least eggshells, you expect something. You expect a crack or a crunch underneath. Like I would come home from school, and I guess I'd be, early teens. And if I said hi to my daddy, which I was daddy's girl, we were so similar. We loved the same things. He cooked, and he was my daddy. But if I said, hi, and he wasn't in a mood, it was okay. But if I said hi and he was in some kind of a mood, I would, I would know it. I guess I don't know how to explain it. It was so volatile. He was volatile. If I didn't say hi, it could set him off and he was already in a good mood. So it was like my actions dictated his emotional response. That's the
Y-
best way.
your action drove his reaction.
Yes. Yeah, and so I was terrified. So what I did best was kind of sit back and not cause any reaction at all. So I ended up being very introverted. And my mom is very outgoing. She's the life of the party. She still is. She's so funny and just a ball to be around. Um, but I think what I did was sort of, like I said, just kind of took a back seat and I sort of wait for the response. I wait to see, and now it's unintentional. I don't want to, I never want to put anyone out, even when I'm driving. I don't want to cut anyone off. Like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Like, it's just like, it was just a natural reaction, like I love my dad so much. I didn't want to see him upset. So just avoidance was my biggest power, I guess, at the time. So anyway,
Wow, so that's a lot. I mean, even in that short little bit is a huge. That's a lot of new information for me.
like
But I mean,
where
we see that a lot in the military with a lot of when you take somebody's mission away, or when somebody loses their mission, they 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 become lost and they don't really know. So in the case of your
Mm,
dad, you see that
yeah,
on multiple different fronts, where now his breadwinningness is taken away from him and he just tries to adapt to what's there with him. And it almost seems like it was really, really hard on you to be able to see that adjustment over that period of time, because you started to see how your dad started to treat you in
yeah,
reaction to a lot of that.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And when you're going through it, you don't see it. And honestly, that's funny you say you're just learning these things in the last 3 years. You've only known me for a couple years. You're learning some new things. I recently just sort of came to terms and learning some of these. Why did I react the way that I did? I used to hate my dad. I used to think, I wish he just wouldn't come home. Like, I didn't wish hurt and harm or terrible disease on him. I just wished he would just go away, like, and let us be. My
Mm.
brother also just felt very he's a year and a half older than me, so he was into a lot of the things my dad was too, weightlifting and bodybuilding and wrestling. So I guess there was a little bit of competition, which you would think would be sort of healthy competition, like getting your boy, strong and whatever male gender stuff. Blah. Sorry. So, anyway, I think that he was also, my brother was more, drawn to my mom, where he would get his comfort from my mom. Um, my dad was my comfort, so it did kind of dwindle away, but I didn't see it happening while it was happening. I'm just, like, learning, "Oh, okay, this is wha," and it is so cliche to say, "Oh, I went through therapy and they're tell me about your dad." It's just it's in every comedic thing ever. Get the laugh track ready, but, like, honestly, I don't blame my dad for anything, and that's what I've come to terms with. I used to, like I said, I used to hate him, and then for a long time, I really resented my mom, thinking she coulda left him. They divorced just before their 25th anniversary, and I was in my 20s and already had a child of my own
Wow.
when yeah, when they separated. It was very physical. She felt very threatened, and she was. So, it really escalated over the years. So I really resented my mom for a long time, and it did change how I saw myself as a wife and how I wanted my kids to see me. And I made some pretty reckless decisions based on that resentment and that I just didn't want them to feel uncomfortable. And I didn't want them to resent me because of how my husband treated me. So it did later. So again, I don't blame him, because even you saying what you said about losing your mission, losing your dream, I'm sure he had a lot of dreams. And he said a lot of things to me growing up, like I wanted to study music in college. And He said, well, any good parent would say, okay, do you want to be a performer or do you want to be a teacher? Because it's two different things. Being a
Mm-hmm.
performer is one in a million if you want to make it big, and back then in the 80s, we all wanted to be, you know, I wanted to be Miss Whitney Houston #2. Like I wanted to do that. I wanted to be the leader of a band, a Joan Jett, I wanted to do that. Um, in reality, I knew that probably I wasn't lucky enough, but just some of the things that you think, "Oh, I'd never tell my kids what my parents told me. I'll never say that to them." He said to me, "Oh boy, I don't think you have what it takes." And that's all I heard. What he meant to say was, "It's a 1 in a million chance to get found. You live in Canton, Ohio. We'd have to move you to Nashville." Like, he never quite finished that, or maybe he did finish it, and I just only heard the bad part. I heard that his dream was gone. So I think for me, if I would have been able to live that dream, some parents would go, "Go, go, go, do it." Where his reaction was more like, "No, I was on that track and it broke my heart. So I don't want it to do that to you too." So he sort of shut that down
It's
quick.
kind of like what we say a lot with our son: hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
And dad was hurt a lot.
Yeah.
And so in turn, it's not that he wanted to hurt you, but it was more of a reality check of rip off the Band-Aid. Done.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And I've said things to my kids with every good intention to protect them. Like, "Oh, maybe you don't want to do that." And it still I hear about it. My oldest is 30, my youngest is 25, thereabouts. And I still hear, "Oh, remember when you said that to me?" Like, "Oh, really?" Like it really affects,
It's more of a protection in your case. Like you're seriously trying to protect, but words matter.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, they mattered, especially from him because he was my daddy, like I said. So, um, I would say about 3rd, 4th grade, my mama thought it would be a good idea to take the kids to church. I mean, they have seen stuff. My mom woke us up in the middle of the night, put us in the car in our pajamas, and we took a trip down to the bar to see if my dad was there. She went in, gave him her 2 cents, came back out, drove us back home. And we'd seen some stuff. We'd heard some stuff. And she thought it was a good time. So we started attending this little Pentecostal church, a little tiny thing. The preacher was, I would say, about 15 years away from retirement, but man, I never like he was one of those preachers that was soft spoken and you knew to listen when he spoke. It was just he just didn't command power or respect. There was just something about him that was so knowledgeable. And even as a 3rd, 4th grader, I just adored him and his wife and his family. His daughter played the piano. It was just a small church. But my mom got to know a couple, and because they became friends, kind of like the 2 of us becoming friends with you and Lena, it just kinda gave them community, gave my dad a reason to come to church, so he started coming to church, probably a good 6 months after we did. He got real involved in, the running sound. He bought the church. He donated a giant sound system, which was way too big for the small church. But he had an up and coming 10-year-old who was gonna be a beautiful soloist in the church. So he bought this beautiful sound system and had that special reverb coming off the rafters, and it made me sound like Amy Grant, like 2.0. It was great. So, and he played guitar for me and I sang. We had tracks back then, and a lot of my I would say a lot of my confidence came from performing in church in a little place where no one judged you. They were just nodding and smiling at you, and whether you sounded great or not. But I knew I sounded good. I knew because it moved me. it something was moving in me. Something was lighting in me, when I sang, but especially the songs that I chose. I was always a really serious kid, not mature at all, but I was just serious, when all the other kids in the youth group wanted to get baptized because it was the thing to do. We're all saved. Let's go get baptized. I was like, I don't want to do it because everyone else is doing it. So I was, of course, like, "Ugh, why are you so dramatic, Caryn?" And I was so dramatic, but I bowed out when everyone else got baptized. I wanted to make sure it was serious for me, and maybe I just wanted to be in the spotlight, didn't want to share. I don't know. I was a girl,
I
but
mean,
Jesus saw
you
me.
were the Amy Grant 2.0, so
I was. I sounded like it. Is all smoke and
well,
mirrors. So,
here's the real question though. Early 90s, did you have the big hair?
oh, I had great hair. Well, once my mom stopped doing my perms for me, there's a picture somewhere. It was 8th grade, right before high school. Oh, bless them. So my mom said, "Let's go get you a body wave," which is kind of what I have now, a little curly wave.
Mhm.
My hair was poker straight, like very straight, very dark black. I had bangs. I don't know. I wasn't trying to look like Cher, but it was happening. So yeah, I had shorter hair, which I liked, made me feel all grown up in the 8th grade. But she wanted to do a body wave just before pictures, which is the worst possible time. Do it in the summer. So she did, but my body wave turned out to be uh it was very tight curls all over my little short head and short hair. I remember the cutest boy in school was Brian. I won't say his last name, but he sat in front of me in class and a history class, and he turned around and said, "Did you stick your finger in a light socket?" It's the worst possible thing
Oh,
any cute
geez.
boy could say to a girl. And of course, I was terrified. I was shy. I just sat there like, a statue. Oh, it was awful. It's terrible.
Oh, that
So
hurts.
yeah.
I would love to see
Anyway,
that picture though.
I'll find it. And I did have big hair, so you'll get to see that too. My senior picture, I was a smoke show, man. I had I had the hair, the little curl and the bangs, and I had the wavy long hair. And yeah, I was I was a little more like I guess I can't remember her name, Debbie Gibson type of thing. I was
Yep.
a little more on the calm side of it. But I liked the big earrings and the bright pants. That was fun.
Oh,
Yeah, we had
no, I was just about to say something, and I'll tell you afterwards, just because. Yeah,
okay.
just remind me of bright colored pants, and I'll remember what to tell you.
Oh, hammer pants.
Oh,
Um,
my mom. Listen, I'm gonna get made fun of because of this so bad. My
just do
my
it.
mom used to make like my clothes, like, I mean, we didn't grow up poor, but we didn't grow up rich. It was just one of those in
Yeah.
betweens. And she actually used to make me pants, and it was back when MC Hammer was huge in like fifth,
Yeah.
sixth grade. And let me tell you,
Parachute.
I used to go home. I used to go to school with those parachute pants. That was a horrible
Yeah.
idea. Now I'm going to really know who listens to the show because they're going to reach out to me and tell me, I heard about your
You
MC
know,
pants.
uh-huh. And she went to the fabric store and
Oh,
picked
yeah.
out the funkiest colors, probably bright pink with like the little black
I
squiggles.
even had the gold, the little like, oh,
Yes.
yeah. Oh, it was primo, let me tell you.
Yes.
So,
Oh, perfect.
so your dad, he bought all this equipment, made you sound really
Yeah.
good for the church. Everything was going, well, what sounds like a
Yeah.
relatively normal childhood.
Yeah. And seeing how other families interacted with each other, because my mom and dad were, like I said, they were life of the party. They were fun. They were nice people. So they were invited to all the young adult parties, and we got to go along. And I just seeing how husbands treated wives and how they treated their kids, and just seeing like Christians in a home was so foreign to me. Um, it was so weird because it was almost like a little light switch. We would go to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. And and you're shaking your head. Yeah, we were at church a lot when we were growing up.
Sunday,
Um,
Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night.
sometimes Sunday morning was like a lunch, and then there was maybe a revival coming up, so we had to get ready for that, and then Monday through Friday, we were at church. Yep. So, but going home, it was the same. It was still the same thing I just explained to you. It was, my dad was still a heavy smoker, and that was just an addiction, he from way back. Um, so we would always have to try to air the house out before their friends would come over. We'd have to hide the ashtrays. I know I'm certain now I know we reeked of it. I know it was not a secret. I'm sure that we all, smelled like the Smoky family. But like our home life was different. Like again, like I said, it was like a light switch. Like it was and people in the church, and I wouldn't say they were all older. There were a lot of people my parents' age, and not many my age, just a few would look at me and say, "Oh, your kids, they're so well behaved. They're so mature. They're such good Christians," and, you know, we were in youth group, I was absorbing some of it. I heard about Jesus, I heard about, good and bad. I heard about God. I heard about judgment, but, God as a father to me seemed a little volatile, and God in general seemed a little volatile, even until recently. Honestly, there was this idea of the image of God, like, I knew Noah, and I knew Adam and Eve, and I knew Jonah, and for each of those didn't end up great for really any of them, living on a boat with a bunch of animals and yeah, and your family for
And
how
family. I
long.
was about to say,
I
and
know.
family. I think that would have been like the hardest part.
And your dad, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then Jonah got eaten by a whale, like, I saw all the felt we went through all the felt stories, like what Veggie Tales kind of stuff is now. I so it just seemed like God was like rightfully, he was the creator of everything. He could judge us if he wanted to. So to me, being good meant not causing any waves, not, doing anything bad, because boy, you don't wanna bring on wrath, not at home. You don't want the belt, you don't want the paddle. My dad wasn't just randomly abusive to us, but he was a disciplinarian, and, depending on the time, there were certain things that just didn't seem like it was consistent. Some things were okay, and some things weren't okay, but they were the same thing. I can't think of like like my brother would get caught smoking and he would get a talking to, and I would get caught smoking and I get the belt. Like you just treated a daughter differently, anyway,
Well, I
but
think it's the
so
stigma of a man versus a
be
lady,
a lady.
right?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
obviously that still grew up in that stigma type.
Right. Yeah. So I think what I was learning at this time, um, was how to keep secrets. I was learning that secrets are okay in certain circumstances. Not all of them, but some of them. Protect I don't even that we never had a conversation like protect the family, protect our image. We never had that conversation, but it was certainly implied, don't, just clean up and don't invite any of your friends. I never had friends over. Um so for me, again, like I said, I was always so serious. There was there was this deep, deep shame is the only word I can think that was just starting a seed at that time. And this time when I was supposed to be experiencing who God was and learning it, I was just entrenched in it. I was finding music and I was learning all of this from just a beautiful Pentecostal church. Like and we were talking about emotions a little bit earlier, how my behavior made him react in a certain way, my dad. Church was a lot like that to me too. The only time I really felt what you would call the presence of God in a Pentecostal church is when everything was amped up. The music was going and you were just like on an emotional high. That's when I really felt the presence of God. But then when I left and after lunch and after, things settled down, we started watching the Browns game, like it was like there's what God, he didn't come home with us. Like it was separate. But for other people, it seemed like that was different. Like our family was the only one who was different, is what I
Wow,
felt like.
you just said something so profound. you know
About the
that
Browns.
no, well, no,
No, go
not
ahead.
about
I'm
not about the
sorry.
Browns for sure. But you said that unlike other people, God didn't come home with you.
Yeah.
That's
It's
I think that's the way. I think a lot of people think that Christian life is so easy. Christian life is so easy to get through life because you've done X, Y, and Z. But if you haven't grown up with that reality, it is kind of like that. It's kind of like, well, God didn't go home with us. He didn't come with us.
yeah.
He
Yeah.
didn't get in the back of the station wagon and join us
Yeah.
on the way home. Uh, so
Yeah.
so then real quick, this is, I think, a perfect moment to be able to bring up, how do you define spiritual resiliency then?
So based on just my personal experience, because that's the only thing that I obviously you're asking, my personal experience. For me, spiritual resiliency, it right now has to do for me with the presence of God, like understanding who God is defines who I am. So knowing that he is not that God that is just judging me. He is a God who didn't want to judge me. So he sent a savior for me, because he didn't want to stand there and say, I have to send you to hell. There's no way that I can't, because you cannot be with me. He sent his son and he made a huge sacrifice for me. So to back up to your question, resiliency is understanding who he is so that it can define who I am, because those are completely correlated. And in order, once I know that, once I get a grip on that, I can then be resilient because I can stand on his faithfulness. I can stand on, oh, he is the same God who, yes, was there when Jonah got swallowed by that whale, but he was the faithful God who still brought Jonah out from his sin when he was running away. And that's when, from this point on, I had been running and running and running from God. From this, I didn't want fake emotion. I didn't want fake experiences. I wanted something real. So, this resiliency, when you asked me to do this podcast, I have to say, I asked several people, why did he ask me? I can give you a list of the top 25 ways not to be resilient based on my life and my experiences. But, you know,
Hmm.
hopefully that helps someone knowing how I haven't been resilient. And knowing I don't have the key, I don't have the exact key. But sometimes to me, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, I hope, some of my mental health challenges and things coming to terms with my own identity. Several things have happened in my life that changed my identity because I didn't have a good grasp of who I was or whose I was, I guess I could say. Like my parents, I didn't want to be theirs. I didn't want to be a sister to my brother. I didn't want to be in the situation. I wanted to be away from it. I couldn't even dream. Like I literally couldn't even have dreams of my future. I never thought about growing up and getting married. I never thought about going off to college. I never thought about anything other than the here and now. And to be resilient, you have to be able to think ahead. You have to be able to see, draw that goal chart, like in order to get up every day and run the 85 miles you run a day, you had to start somewhere. You started with the goal chart, or you started with a little star on the calendar, whatever you people do, you runners. Like, buy a new pair of shoes every time you hit another mile, or I don't know. So like you have to have small goals to be resilient, but you have to know who you are and that there are boundaries. There's going to be failure. Every time I hit a failure, it stopped me in my tracks and I gave up every time because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know, what my future could be. So, that's a long answer,
Well,
but in the process of what we're talking about
mhm.
here, that's what spiritual resilience is to
Well,
me,
and
is being in his presence and
you
understanding
bring
who
up
he
another really
is.
good point. You have to have small goals to be resilient. And it's true. I think that we think that you immediately start off with these huge goals of, okay, I want to make $300,000. Well, you have to make $1 before you can make $300,000 in a lot of
Yeah.
cases. And that's a small goal that's building up to that bigger goal of eventually having X amount of money. So I think that we forget that you have to have those small goals in order to be able to develop and get those big goals in life. Now, you
Yeah.
explained what spiritual resiliency looks like to you in that sense, but in what kind of a situation, because I know you've got a lot more to the story that we haven't even gotten to. But I'd like to know a situation, a time or
Mhm.
3 or 4 of when you had to rely on spiritual resilience in order to be able to make it through, to get through that situation you were going through in life.
Okay. Well, I'll just go backwards instead of starting at the beginning. We'll start from now and go backwards. Because spiritual resiliency was never something like you said in your intro. We focus on the physical, the emotional, the mental part of our well-being, but we often overlook and not think about spiritual resiliency. I always thought spirituality was just something that you obtained, like you just or you just had because you went to church, um, to being resilient. Whew, um, I found recently spiritual resiliency in community. So my example is 5 years ago, Dan, my husband, got a job at Caterpillar in South Carolina, and we moved. We both lived in Ohio all of our lives. I was 45 and he was a little older than that. And we moved down to South Carolina
I like
away
I
from
like
our
how you put
family.
that very gingerly on him too. A little
Just
older,
a
just
little,
just a
just a
little.
little. He really is not that much older, just a little, but he's older. So my daughter was going off to college. My son was moving out and going to, doing his own life and getting an apartment on his own. Um, so I really kind of struggled. I'm like, no, 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 no. My kids need me. And Dan said, honey, they're not going to need you as much as you think that they're going to need you. They're in their young 20s. I said, but oh gosh, if they need me for 1 minute, I want to be right there out of 365 days a year. And that's just the emotional part of me. That's just the dramatic Karen. And he said, okay, well, that's one way to go. Or we could go and see how South Carolina works for us and they can visit, that kind of stuff. Let's just think about it. Let's pray about it. So we did. We thought about it. We did a lot more thinking and talking than praying at the time. And finally, I said, okay, this is a good opportunity for you. I want you to have every opportunity to advance. And gosh, who doesn't love the beach? So let's go. So we came down to South Carolina, and for the first 9 months or so, I was just kind of settling in. I had a lot to do. I got to, there were no kids. So I was working from home. I was finishing up some classes, remotely through Kent State. And then I was designing a house, like getting new furniture and fun stuff. So about the first 6 months or so, Once all that was done, my husband, just the wise man that he is, said, I think you need to get out and talk to human beings. I was just talking to my cat. It was just me and her. And even my job, there wasn't a lot of, we weren't doing this, over online. We were just typing. So he said, well, it's time to find a church. So we found a church, and immediately I just wanted to be in it. I wanted to find out what there was for me in this area, and how can I help and how can I serve? And we got involved in small group, and immediately just started feeling challenged by the pastor, to share what God has done for us, and not only share, but just grow. Let Him continue to do what He is planned, what He's already planned. Just give Him an opportunity to do it. And in order to do that, be in the word, get in community, start doing your life with other people. That doesn't mean y'all holy rollers to stick together and only do what Christians do. We all go to Hobby Lobby and Chick-fil-A together and nothing else. And we wear one-piece bathing suits at the beach. And it's not that.
That's
It's a
awesome.
little different. Like, we're literally doing our lives messy, ugly, nasty, gross stuff, like, not nasty, gross. You know what I'm saying? Just life is gross, babies puking, and, adoption and infertility and trauma. And we were just doing life together, and victories and buying houses. And, um, so I felt good. I felt good about where I was in my walk with God. Right. So it had been, I would say, a solid year. Christmas had come and gone. I think my daughter came to visit, but a new year started. It was winter. It was quiet in the house. And I started to realize, oh, you know what? I'm not all that good of a person. And I don't know what brought that thought. I'm just not a very good human being. And I was kind of negative to Dan. So I'm really not a great wife. And oh gosh, I'm a terrible mom. My kids need me. They're both struggling with certain things and I'm not there. Oh God, I'm a terrible daughter. Sheesh. Like, the things I've done. And those thoughts would come, I would say, about once a month, for a couple months. All this time I'm serving in the church. I'm part of the worship team. We're giving, we're sharing. We're living life with other Christians and community, but I'm not talking about this stuff because, it's just their thoughts. But because I didn't talk about it and I didn't share, the once a month thoughts started coming more like once a week, and once every 2, 3 times a week, where I would just feel so tired, and I knew I was moody. I was depressed. I missed my family. I missed my daughter. So I would just go to bed early, which is, again, not being a great wife, and I wouldn't always have any dinner done, like things like that, things just to bless my husband. I wasn't doing what I could. And so it just made me feel more miserable. And then the thoughts started coming more like once a day. And then it got to be once every couple hours, once an hour. And I would say by fall, it was every minute of every day. I was different when I was in church, and I was different when I was home. Like, I had fallen into a trap in my mind and I couldn't get out. Like, there was a trap door, and my foot was stuck in it, and I just kept pulling on it, and it was like quicksand, just pulling me farther in. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was so angry. Uh, and I mean, I could worship with the best of them, and I felt God, and I was praying for people. I had a list of people that I was spending great amount of times praying for and ministering to. In the process of all that, my prayers felt like they were just bouncing off the ceiling. And I would read and I wouldn't understand it. To read the word and I wouldn't get it. I just wanted it so bad. I'm like, what in the so I just kept living life. I'm a bad Christian. I'm a bad daughter of God. I'm a bad musician. I'm old. Nobody wants to hear me sing. Nobody wants to hear me play. What? It was bad. It was rough. And so many times I wanted to be done. I was tired. I was really tired. So I started making plans, serious plans, to be done. I could take a trip and it would be very easy to not come home, to make it look like an accident. I'm a planner, I'm an organizer. So I was gathering financial documents. I was gathering life insurance passwords and making sure my husband had everything he needed to know for when I wasn't going to be there. I was planning. And it was as soon as
Wow.
he would walk out the door, I would get my folder out and I would make the plans. And I was ready. And I was more certain about this than breath in the air that I was going to do it. Suicide ideation is tricky because some people say, oh, a lot of people have it. A lot of people have those thoughts about suicide. It doesn't mean you're actually going to do it. But boy, um, speaking, talking, not living in your own shame is the way out of that cycle. And I had never learned to talk about my shame. I had never learned to be honest with my flaws and my failures. I could tell you that, I don't always read the word every day. That's a flaw. But my deep heart, things I didn't think I could change. I don't think I can change my I mean, I hope someone will forgive me if I say this word. It's the craziness that I felt in my head. I felt crazy. Look, no one else is like me. No one else thinks like this. And if they do, they're doomed too. It was so strong. I couldn't talk myself. And you know me, I'm a glass half full person.
Oh yeah.
So if a friend comes over and says, I have this problem, I had an answer for them. I had prayer, I had the word, I had worship, I had the presence of God. I had everything, every tool that they needed. But I didn't have it for myself because I didn't know where it was
Mm-hmm.
coming from. Like it's almost easy to play the game in what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
But when the reality, happens and you're in it, I couldn't come out of it. So many times, I'm sorry, you want to
No,
say
you're
something?
good. Caryn, I think that we forget too often that you can't give out what you don't have yourself, but that also works in the reversal. You're giving out a ton and you didn't leave
Mm,
anything on the side for yourself. Because you're
yeah.
a very giving person. You're somebody that invests heavily in the relationship that you have with other people. I know this from personal
Yeah.
experience. So I know that
Mhm.
you also invested in my wife a lot with a lot of those
Yeah.
things, and you really learned how to open up about a lot of this stuff. So whereas you were feeling the craziness come and set in, sorry, lack of a better term, one that you used yourself,
Mm,
the craziness that you felt kind of setting in, and that heaviness of the fog coming down, um
yeah.
there was
That
a
was
lot of
it.
ways
It was a fog.
that the people around you, because you had invested in those people and you'd invested in those relationships, what did they start to see to help you
Mm.
come out of that?
So, Dan, of course, saw something, because I really wasn't talking, but he would hear me. Oh, you'd drop a spoon and I'd say something really mean about myself. Just dropped a spoon. But I couldn't stop the words from coming out of my mouth, So I was so critical of myself and I would make fun of myself. So he would send me texts in the middle of the day and just, hey, sweetheart, are you okay? And oh, you don't know how many times I started a text. Nope, not okay. I just wanted to tell him, but I deleted it. And so spent I probably started about 20 or 30 texts or messages or dialed phone numbers to Lena or, to my husband to say, I need something. I know this isn't right. I need to change. Something has to change, but I couldn't do it. Like I couldn't follow through. So I don't know that anyone saw outside of my really close inner circle, which was just you. I actually did have a really close friend in Ohio. We are still, she's one of the sweetest people, a coworker of mine. She's one of my best friends. And during this time, we really grew apart, like not having personal conversations anymore, just business, only business, just get the work done. And I would sign in, I would sign out. So she noticed, and it turned into me being scared that she was going to replace me in a job or something. I mean, there was so many weird things happen. I'm a terrible coworker, all those terrible things I am. So I thought she was justified to do it. So there was a strain on my relationships with my friends for sure back home because I was so isolated. But one day I pulled up a text and I texted your wife and said, I'm not okay. I need help. I mean, I'm stuck. And it was 22 minutes. She was at my front door, um, sitting Indian style on my floor. And she just listened. She heard everything I had to say. And your wife, when your wife prays, I almost picture God leaning up on the edge of his seat to hear, like she, again, not commanding, not, like in a determined type of prayer, like, you claim that we would be blessed and let's, claim it and name it. And like, she's not that prayer person. She is the person that knows the word and she prays the word. And when I say the word, I say the truth. She says the truth in her prayers. And that's what I had been missing. I had been so de- depressed with the lies that I just needed to hear another person say the
Yeah.
truth. And it was, I've had low times. This was the lowest. Um, but I can tell you, since that day, I have never been as low. Never again. So there was a healing that took place, and the healing came from the truth being
Wow.
spoken in my home, and the truth being spoken to me from someone who God put right in front of me, gave me this resource. And this resource had been been playing this role of life with you for years before I knew her, had met Jesus on her own, had been growing in the truth of the Lord, had come into my life at just the right time. Like there was no coincidence about that. God wanted to heal me on that day at my lowest
Mhm.
point, and he did on that day. So your question was about how resilience, spiritual resiliency, and a story about this. Spiritual resiliency to me is not only the presence of God, but it is hearing and knowing and speaking the truth. And when I say truth, I mean the
Mhm.
capital T, the truth. We live in a culture, good and bad, that we speak our own truth. We speak our own truth, and again, good and bad. Sometimes people need to know themselves. They need to speak how they're feeling. They need to speak their emotions. They need to speak fears and their confusion. That's their truth. That's what they're living in, of course. But the capital T, truth is, for me in my life and my spiritual resiliency is going right back to, look, you were born into this family that you didn't understand. You didn't feel that you fit in, because the truth is you don't fit in here. You don't fit here in this world. Where you fit is back in the arms of your Father, who you were created in his likeness with all of his love. I mean, if you want to talk about emotion, God's not an emotional God. Imagine the type of emotion's not the word, but imagine the amount of love that it took to give up a part of yourself, to become human in this time, to give everything for me, for you, for us, because he just wanted us to be back. He just wanted us close again. Like, imagine that amount of love, that unconditional love that I never felt, I never knew. So, spiritual resiliency is knowing that truth and living in that truth and reminding yourself and others of that truth. Because immediately I was no longer shy about my shame. I was no longer shy about my fears, about my, my depression. Um, I didn't run out and scream it to my neighbors and scare them, but when I had an opportunity to talk about it, I did. I had a voice, and I certainly say that was my healing, and my healing is continuing. It's continuing to go on.
So, Caryn, take a moment, and I want you to speak to that one person out there who is maybe going through the same thing, going through those same thoughts. I want you to speak to that one person and just give them the best advice you wish you had received yourself. Speak to Caryn.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, this is the time right now. This podcast is going to come out. This is time for resolutions. It's a new year. New year, new you. That's way, way oversaid. And I get it. I completely get it, because a new you seems like it's a distant memory. It seems like something that you could never change in a million years. You're so far behind the bar. You have wasted time, and you've hurt yourself because you haven't taken the correct steps yet. And I get it. I absolutely get it. But it is never, ever, ever too late. I'm going to tell you right now that in this very moment, there's a God who is closer than a breath on your cheek, who loves you. He sees you. He sees everything about you, and he could never, ever love you less or love you more. You are exactly where he needs you to be to make your life something that is resilient, to make your physical, emotional, mental, spiritual life one that is in balance. So take just one small step. My advice is, and talk to someone. You may not have told anyone. You may have told several people and they just don't hear you. They don't believe you. Try again. Try until someone hears you. There are a lot of counselors. If you're in the South Carolina area, I can certainly recommend my counselor, Crystal McCall in Somerville, who is an amazing listener. Um, but anywhere you are, there's help and there's hope. And Jesus loves you. Absolutely.
Anywhere you are, there he is. Hey, Caryn, thank you. You did. I know you were so
Thank
nervous.
you.
I know you were nervous, but you did so good. And I mean, we have to do
Thanks.
this. We have to do it at least once.
Yes, bring it on.
Are you sure?
It's not the laugh track, is it? I'm used to immense applause. Just bring it on.
Well, okay, listen. We've gone through this whole time, and I know that you've got book recommendations. You know how it goes. We always have to ask for a book recommendation. So, what is your book recommendation for our listeners?
Well, my book recommendation, first of all, if you love fiction and you love good stories that sort of tear jerk, and you love to know more about God and his nature, there's a great Christian author named Frank Peretti who wrote a book called The Oath. And it's even something you could just start reading. There's other books he wrote in like a series of darkness, and there's angels and demons, not quite angels and demons like Dan Brown, but like this is more biblically aligned. I wouldn't say correct, certainly, but it's from an imagination of spiritual warfare. And it kind of gives you a really fun perspective to see good and evil and the lengths that they go through to like really take over, to take over someone's thought process and to take over their lives. It's an amazing book. The Oath. It's my favorite book of all time. In fact, the fun fact, my husband and I, when we met as friends because I was recently divorced and I didn't want anything serious. I just wanted to have a friend, and we were both avid readers. And he said, "Bring your favorite book, and we're going to meet at Denny's as friends." And I brought The Oath, and he brought Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. It was a 1,700 page book. I thought, oh, this guy is so out of my league. Like, there's no, but thank goodness he put up with me. But it's a great book. And of course, I recommend you can get it free at any church in the nation in any language now. You can get it online. There are so many resources and so many ways to get the Holy Bible written in everyday language or written in old school Latin, these and thous, if that's what you prefer. But it is my highest recommendation for a roadmap to any part of your life.
Well, I am so glad that you took the time to sit down and have this conversation. We could go on for hours upon hours just going through some of these.
Yeah, I've got 3 more decades to talk about. I'm gonna just catch me on my next book.
and I mean, even recently, every single time that y'all make an adjustment, something seems to happen, but yet there's that comma, but God.
Yeah. Yeah, he's always faithful. He's always here. And it's not always an emotion. It's not always on an emotional high. Oftentimes it's just so simple and quiet. And those are the most powerful times for me. It's easy to feel God at church when they're singing all those amazing songs about how blessed you are just because you have a smile on your face. But that we know that's not always the truth.
No.
So, God, he is as faithful as anything. My dog's about to bark, so brace yourself.
Baker, gotta love it. All right, here we go. Hey, today's episode is only possible thanks to my friend and producer, G. Frazier with 369sounddesign.com. He is truly the one with the hardest job to try to make me sound good each and every single week. This whole new year, this new time in our lives, we are blessed by the entire team here at the Wartime Leadership Podcast. See you next time. Be blessed.